James, thank you so much for meeting with
Sure.
us today.
Yeah.
This is a huge pleasure. James is the, what would you call it, founder, CEO, chairman?
Janitor as well.
Of Clarke
Yeah.
Capital, and in addition, he's a personal mentor, and so I appreciate you coming on here.
Yeah.
Of all the interviews that we've done, there have been some that are really compelling,
Yeah.
Others that are just full of interest.
Yeah.
This is the one that I'm most excited for.
That's
so
very kind
thanks
of
for
you.
finding the time. We got him in between meetings, signing documents, doing bills, so thank you for coming.
Oh no,
today.
it's my honor entirely. Thanks so much, Trevor.
You
Really
bet,
appreciate
absolutely.
it. Thank you.
So to kind of bridge the gap of who's going to be listening so that
Sure.
we can make it pertinent,
Yeah.
we've got a huge segment of people
Right.
who are existing solopreneurs, and they do 0 to 100 grand a year online, virtually.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
We've got a set that's trying to go from 6 to 7, and then we've got a smaller segment that's going from 7 to 8.
7 to 800,000 of revenue,
No,
or 7 to 8.
figures.
Wow.
7 to 8 figures, yeah.
Okay, so
we've got a
that's
subset of-
a big
Yeah.
run rate, isn't it? I mean, that's
It is.
amazing to see where they're going. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
I mean,
Super.
and it's incredible. I'll go on a little preamble that, like,
Okay.
I was thinking about the other day. It's what is possible now today with the internet is something that has never been possible. And I was trying to word it, and I'm like the great equalizer, being dramatic, the rebellion, whatever the case may be, because you can start with almost no capital, and in a matter of a few years, you can become, the nouveau riche, like. Establish yourself.
Listen, I've watched you and I've known you for some time, and to see what you've done with sort of taking your story and your set of skills and just your gumption to get things done, it's been nothing short of amazing. So thanks for being the example to all of us of how this can be done. You really are.
Thank you, James.
So
Appreciate
thanks, Trevor.
that.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the questions, we're really interested in your story.
Sure.
From zero to hero. So the whole, most people only see the beautiful end masterpiece. And like, oh, it's always been, a cakewalk.
Yeah.
What's that story that no one sees?
Well, it's not very sexy, the story. We can tell you that. So it's not, if you add this all up, of course there's a nice something at the end. Maybe there's this pot of gold at the end, but I would argue that my story is probably very similar to all of those who are listening and those that you've just described to me. My goal coming out the gate as an entrepreneur is just to be able to have enough that I could go on a nicer date with the girls that I was trying to attract at the time. Maybe have a little nicer car or something like that. I'm kind of a car guy. I thought that was, wow, I could do this. And I also had a really terrible boss coming out of my undergrad. And that, for me, was one of the best things that ever happened in my career, is to have this boss that I simply had to make a decision to say, I love this company where I'm working. I love sort of what I'm doing. I was working in the services industry at a resort, and it was wonderful. However, I had to report to this person that was one of the, it was a Twilight Zone moment in my life. I just couldn't quite get my arms around why, and up was up, not up, and down was not down. It just didn't make any sense. So I left that organization, and shortly after leaving that organization, made the decision I will never work for that kind of person ever again. And going a step further, I'm not going to work for anybody but myself ever again. And that's what it's been for me. And so that was late 90s. So that was 1998 that I decided to go into business for myself. I partnered with a then roommate. We went to what we knew, which was knocking doors, as many here in our geography do. And I had worked for a guy named Todd Peterson, who has built a now multi-billion-dollar company, who's a dear friend and a great mentor to me. And because of the relationship that I had with him, I was able to start that business, which, by the way, is competitive in nature to Todd's own business. They're now known as Vivint. And he was such a great mentor and such a great friend. We had our office space there. We were competing against reps, but he was still so kind to let me start that business. We did. We added 2 more partners in the process, so it was 4 partners running this very small business that went to sort of 50 full-time employees to about 100 full-time employees, and I felt like I was doing a lot of, or at least a bulk of the work relative to finance and accounting, and I didn't have an accounting background, so for me, it was a natural next step to say, hey, listen, I'm going to take sort of the skills that I have. You guys can keep doing and running this business, but I'm going to move into what I thought was really compelling at the time, in the late 90s and going into 2000, online retail. So taking the same products that we were selling door to door and take them to a retail model. Now, the problem with that is I didn't know how to, crunch one line of code. Not to save my life could I have done that. However, I found some people that could, and we engaged. Website developer company number 1 went out of business. Number 2 went out of business. So you remember, this was just going right into the .com bubble bursting. The .bomb had gone off. And these businesses, these businesses were falling by the wayside, just one after another going out of business. And so I had a mind shift. My shift was, listen, I'm no longer going to pay salaries. No longer am I going to put up this large deposit for these companies to take and say, oh yeah, that kind of funds are going out of business party. I decided that I'd try to align ourselves with a partner. And I had learned a bit about affiliate marketing. So this was, again, the end of 2001. Today is 9/11 and Hand Over Heart Day, and thinking about the fallen heroes and what took place here in our country. But I remember that day distinctly, that was the day that I had made the decision to go off and do this on my own. So just 5 weeks later, I was starting my own business. And again, now fast forwarding back to aligning ourselves with a group. I learned about affiliate marketing, and how an affiliate marketer could get paid on a bounty, that they could get paid X if they delivered Y. So the chore was then, in services to the home, we were selling products like Dish Network and DirecTV. If they got a new subscriber, they would hand that new subscriber over to us, we would close the deal, hand that back to the brand, so a Dish and a Direct, and receive a bounty. A portion of that went to the affiliate, for those that aren't familiar with affiliate marketing. So that's how we built our business, but it was through aligning a relationship with one of these small web development firms. And so we did that and saw great success in finding alignment between the two organizations. The other benefit was we got paid long before we had to write a check out to this partner. So we had some healthy float that could fund our business, that could fund the sort of the scale and addition of new employees. And within that first year, we were up to where we were doing well over $1 million in sales. My goal was, if we could just do 6 or 7 of these sales every day, I'd have a 6-figure salary. I could take care of my family. My wife could stop working, and all of those things. And a lot of our good fortune sort of took place, and that was able to happen by a specific date by which we set a goal, and that was the goal. That was May 29th, 2003. And that was the day that our first daughter was born. That I had to be cash flowing so that my wife could then quit her very, very good job that helped finance our business. Wow. So as a tribute to my then very new bride and our family, that company was and is today called ClearLink. Earl is my wife's maiden name. My last name is Clark. You put those together, the anagram for the two is ClearLink. So kind of an exciting story. It's a business that we then sold about 10 years later. Had 600 full-time employees at the time. It today, I think, has somewhere in the order of 1,600. I understand that they're owned by a publicly traded organization. They're still called ClearLink. They acquired another business in the Seattle area just recently. I saw that through the news. Yeah. So we're thrilled for their success. And we're thrilled for sort of that culture that was built and the jobs that have been created in this region, now in sort of. I think there's a very large office in the Scottsdale area, now in Seattle, 2 offices that are of real scale and size in Utah. It's a real business, and we're really proud of what's taken place there. But it was the right time for us to sell in 2011. The bigger part of the story for me was that we tried to sell that business in 2008. As we all know, the world fell apart again. So we saw the .com bubble burst. But then again, the Great Recession of 2008, and we thought we were going to sell that business. All of the offers that we had on the table, poof, went away. So I had sort of walked away from the business, didn't want to have the golden handcuffs that a CEO normally would, and brought in, it was the same CEO that came from that small web development company that we had partnered with. They became equity stakeholders through a transaction. We had acquired their business. He became the leader, and it was a great marriage between the two organizations, but I suddenly found myself without a job. So what do I do? And that's when I set up an office in New York, figuring that I would soon have some liquidity and want to invest and do things that would be very meaningful for myself and our family. I was not done. I was not one of those guys that's going to look, retirement in the face and say, do I or don't I? This was an easy decision. As a steward, it's really easy for us to say, yeah, we've got so much intellectual capital now, we would be foolish to stop. And so it was very easy for us in 2008 to say, yep, I'm going to learn this investment model. We didn't know exactly what it was going to be, so I set up an office in New York, was there every other week, learning about best practices in investing. Really dialed into this growth equity model. And I, as an entrepreneur, much like you talking about the entrepreneurs that are listening today, believe that probably the most difficult time in any business is from idea to $1 million of EBITDA or $1 million of profits. After that, you can just sort of scale. You can start hiring people. You can afford, sort of an accounting department. But it's that really scrappy time between, hey, this is my idea and I've got to get it going, up to really, I've got 7 figures of profitability. That is by far, in my estimation as an entrepreneur, the most difficult part in any business. So what did we do? We honed a thesis around those that have gotten to that place, achieved, much like yourself, achieved 7 figures of earnings on an annual basis, and then the rest is scale. And so the opportunity that it presented for ourselves in focusing on what we call growth equity. This isn't venture, it's not angel, and it's not large private equity. It is businesses that are on their way up. Businesses that have proven that they are a real business. They might not have a lot of sophistication. They might not have access to capital. They might not have intellectual property, the things that can protect their business, but those are the things that we can add. We can add that to their business, and then we can add some growth capital as sort of the fuel in this business to take it to a whole new level. And that's what we've been able to do, and I think do well over the last 6, now almost 7 years since we set up our family office in our investment firm, where we've deployed over $70 million of assets from our firm alone. There's been some partner and syndicate deals in there, but we've allocated that number just from our firm, and this is what we consider to be a harvest year. It's been a great time for us to look at the opportunity to take some of those chips off the table. So we just finished 2 months ago an IPO of one of these portfolio companies thanks. We take that. That's one of those, whew. But now we've got to prove ourselves to the market, of course. So we're really happy about that. And the market's responded very, very well. That's one where we engaged what I would argue is one of the best underwriters that you could in our sort of for our size. In an underwriting group and really built solid relationships there. Took the company out. We were raising $85 million through the IPO. We were 12 times oversubscribed on our goal to be sort of 3 to 4 times oversubscribed. So it means we had over $1 billion of orders, which allowed us to sort of choose the best investors, these long hold investors that really believe in us as a company. Went out at a sort of bracketed $14 to $16 a share. First day of trading was at $20+ a share. It's risen substantially since. It trades today at about $26 a share. So it was a healthy IPO. I think it's one that we're very, very grateful for. So much of this is through good fortune and providence and whatever one might look at as just being really fortunate. We work really hard. We're not in the IPO business, we're in the pet health business there, and you'll hear those words from our CEO, but we're thrilled about that one. And the Friday prior to that, executed on the document selling our consumer electronics camera company. So this is, in fact, our harvest year. This is our harvest fall. We continue to look for harvest opportunities, but that's about right. Every 5 to 6 to maybe 7 years, it's time to pull that liquidity off the table, and now we look for opportunities to deploy. So I know that's a long-winded answer to your brief question of giving a little context and a little story of who we are, but that's sort of where we come from and what our roots are. We're just scrappy players in business.
That's good.
Opportunists.
So one of the things that you've talked a lot to me about is enterprise value when you're talking about companies.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so we look at businesses in 2 ways primarily. So you could build a lifestyle business in which you could probably have a great income. For me at the time, as I look back, at that sort of that 2001 era for me, gosh, if I could have made a healthy 6-figure income, that's a great lifestyle business. I get paid if I show up and if I do the work, but that doesn't seem like a business that you're going to sell to me, perhaps. And I'm being very general in saying that. It might be widget A. I don't have any intellectual property around it. I have a good income. You could compare that to maybe like a more educated version of that kind of operator or lifestyle business would maybe be like a dentist who's got a practice, doesn't get paid when he doesn't show up generally, but makes a really healthy, probably 6-figure income, and in special cases beyond, right? When we talk about building enterprise value, conversely, on the other side, it's about building a business that does have a moat built around it. You're showing up and you're pushing the rock every single day and you're building value within the business, but it is something that inherently will have value. That someone like me or someone on Wall Street or from another investment firm is going to say that has a lot of enterprise value, has inherent value to what it is. Independent of perhaps team, independent of leadership, independent of a lot of different factors, but that is valuable. A good example is looking at the early days of an Apple, for example, an outlier, an enormous outlier, but built inherently in disrupting a market where they are taking what we used to punch numbers into and give us now this glass screen, which I wasn't very excited about, by the way, 10 years ago when I got my first Apple. I actually got an Apple phone, an iPhone, about 2 months before they were released to the public. Had an insider colleague and friend that gave me one, and I wanted my buttons from my BlackBerry that I was using, right? I don't know if anybody else felt that same way, but I wanted my buttons. But it wasn't until the apps really started getting delivered, and now you've got access to the world and financial calculators, and you've got this map, and you've got a GPS. I no longer have to rent those at the Hertz outlet for $50 a day. I've got this phone that costs me $50 or $100 a month. So that was the disruptor, and that's where they built real inherent value, both with a brand and with technology, asymmetrical to what the market was doing at that time. Very, very different than what the buttons were and the calendar maybe that a BlackBerry could provide, but that's a great disruptor that adds a lot of enterprise value. And the story's still being told, right? I remember when I was in business school looking at Apple, can it go beyond this stock price? And it was a very, very low share price at that time. Yeah, they have and they will, and they did. Now the key for every one of those kinds of companies that have enterprise value is to answer the question, what have you done for me lately? So it always has to be about the next. But they have proven a model of disruption, and inherently there's great value there versus sort of this lifestyle business where you're showing up every day and you eat what you kill, and you'll get paid if you're there in the office, or you'll get paid if you're doing XYZ thing. You want something to have inherent value. Build a moat around a business. Not my words, Warren Buffett's business, words in business, right? But that's what we do here in our organization to try to enhance the enterprise value of a business well above and beyond where we buy it.
So how did you come to that conclusion? Because when you started, late 90s, early 2000s, was that forefront on your mind? Enterprise value?
No. A lot of that comes out of misses, errors, mistakes, right? If we don't learn from our mistakes, who are we, right, in all of this? So I remember a day in a former business where I came to my team and I said, hey, we have this opportunity. We have an opportunity to buy now what is a sort of beat up company in a certain space. And I won't mention names to protect the innocent in this, both from the C-level team as well as the company. But this is a company that was trading at probably $200 million of market cap. Publicly traded, they'd raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They still had $100 million of cash on the balance sheet, no debt. So one could argue, that if it's profitable and if you have a way of making that company profitable, why not buy them? You're essentially, if you did a leveraged buyout, you could buy them for, say, 100 of cash. The other side of the 200 is wiped away. I'm sorry, let me say this differently. You'd buy them for 100 of debt, 100 of the obligations wiped away with the cash that's on their balance sheet. So net, you've just paid $100 million for this business that we believed at the time could cash flow somewhere in the order of $20 million of EBITDA, even on a monthly basis over time, to our business. That feels like a win to me. And oh, by the way, they've got some really healthy IP. They've got some really healthy relationships that are locked up. That's a good acquisition target, no? I would argue that it is, and I did, and my C-level team looked at me like I had 3 heads. And needless to say, we didn't do the deal, but that is the time where we decided that we needed to sell that business. Turns out I wasn't so crazy, because another very, very bright person named Rupert Murdoch in a very large organization bought that business, paid over $1 billion for that business, and then settled the lawsuit, winning another $160 million for that business. They maintain the IP, wow, and that's where the lawsuit winnings came from. And they also maintain the site, and it's a very, very healthy cash flow positive business that in a lot of ways is saving maybe the larger part of Rupert Murdoch's businesses. So it was a very interesting thesis for us to look at and say, how do we build enterprise value? How couldn't we generate our own intellectual property internally? And that's where we sort of learned that through a painful lesson, but we look now for opportunities akin to that. And there are always opportunities to buy businesses where we can sort of say, our 1 + 1 is going to equal 3, or our 100 plus whatever else is going to equal, $1 billion+ dollars. And I think those are the opportunities that we're very interested in today, and that's how we've built the core of our thesis here at Clarke Capital.
Interesting. So if we rewind back to your early days when you were in that growth stage, talk about going from 0 to $1 million, in profit. It's easy for people to talk about, to think about, but what separates those that do it from just think or talk about it is what they do consistently. Persistence. What was your consistent, persistent daily ritual to actually achieve that? Yeah,
so it's That's a great question, and for me, I sort of put it on sort of 2 points, really. I'm just a farm kid from Idaho, right? I didn't come with some amazing education, didn't grow up in a family of means. I had relatives with means. We were certainly the have-nots amongst the haves, so I got to watch them and see, but realized early on that I'm just a ditch digger, and that I've just got to work and be a little scrappier and have the gumption that perhaps others don't. So, I don't know that we ever invented anything that was all that special. We just saw out in the marketplace, and I remember seeing this very specifically, there was one site in consumer services where we started, ClearLink, that was doing very, very well. They were doing tens of millions in sales, but it was a terrible website. It was terrible by anyone's estimation. This isn't just my feeling, but I would argue that most people would look at that and say, that's not a great website. It wasn't ergonomically friendly. It wasn't helpful. And so we thought, gosh, if we could just sort of pivot, make it a beautiful website, very ergonomically, with site ergonomics and friendly and much easier, and then get the word out, we could probably take over a portion of that position and or just create a much larger market. That's sort of what we did to sort of show, how to just dig some ditch and be just a little bit better than maybe a market leader. That's part of our thesis and what we would do to sort of build our business. Second part of that Trevor, is ours was just this simple goal of, I need to sell this number to provide for my family. And in the case of listeners and those that are here with us, it may be as simple as, I need to do this to make my car payment. For me, it was, I need to do this because I made a commitment to my bride that I would take care of her as this baby is born on May 29th, 2003. And so then it begs the question, what is it that I need to do to get to those sales? And how do I scale up? How many people do I have to hire? How many computers do I need to have? What kind of phone line do I need to have, or internet to handle some bandwidth, some servers that I might need? And so everything came from this basic goal of, if I can just sell 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 of these things on a daily basis, it's going to be okay, and I'll meet those goals. But the funny thing about goals, and that one goal for me, is it's always a moving target. You hit that goal, and then it's, oh, okay, what if I could do 3x that goal? And what if I could now do 300 of those things a day? And to where, when we sold a ClearLink, I think we were generating about $500 million of sales on an annualized basis for our brand partners. Now, we didn't get to book all of that revenue, obviously, as we were brand partners that way, but that's meaningful, and that's real, and that's a business that you can be proud of. But we had to make certain decisions, because it would have been very, very easy for me to say, I'm going to grow this as a lifestyle business. Back to the conversation. It's just going to be me, and I'm going to outsource to India or to the Philippines or call center work, and we did that for a time to meet some of these goals. We made a fundamental decision that this was going to be about enterprise value, that this is a business that is going to be built to last, and we're going to be proud of the day that we sell it. And this isn't going to be one of those, we've all heard the stories about businesses that are sold, and they sell here, and the seller buys them back here. I didn't want to be one of those guys. I wanted to sell here and for it to be worth this down the road. And even to a point where I was approached by one of the largest private equities on the planet to come back and buy that business and see some opportunities that they had, sort of in their minds and what they wanted to do with that business. That didn't happen. The valuation sort of got away from them, but that was a great moment for me.
Yeah.
And a high compliment and high praise to be approached to say, hey, come partner as an equal partner buying this business back, and you can run it. That's the kind of business that we wanted to build. And that, I think, is sort of the enterprise value story that we're fundamentally about.
Interesting. So I was talking with a guy a few days ago, and you might even know him out here, but he has the first on-demand fulfillment supplement, private label supplement company. And there's many that will fulfill in the orders of thousands, tens of thousands. But if someone gets a single sale of some, lotion or potion, he'll print it and ship it out for them. Anyway, I asked him, how did you differentiate yourself? And he said that he started when Tim Ferriss's book came out, and everyone wanted to do the 4-hour work week.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, all right.
Very familiar with the book. I love that book. I just have never been able to do that. Mine turns into a 100-hour work week, right?
Well, so that's what was his point. He said everyone was coming to me saying, hey, I want to do the 4-hour work week. And he realized that for them to do that, he had to have the 12 to 15-hour work day.
Yeah.
And so he says that what he's built has been solely based on what you're talking about: gumption, elbow grease, hard work.
Yep.
So for those that are going from attempting to go from 6 to 7 figures, and they want to move beyond the lifestyle business, because 6 to 7 figures with e-com or info products, you can live pretty well.
I'll say you can.
Yeah. So what does that daily ritual? How should that look for that person?
Yeah. So we see this a lot in our organizations that people are coming into the office and they flip on their computer screen and they're very reactionary. They react. They've got all the emails that came in from when they left the office at 7 o'clock at night to when they're showing up at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Yeah. So the first thing that they'll do is react. I think that's a mistake. So talking about one of those first pivots or changes that they can make in their workday is you decide what you're going to do that day. You decide what the most important, and by the way, I learned this from one of our operating partners and my partner here in the firm. He does this so well that he decides, the 5 to 10 things that he must get done. Then beyond that, he'll put the 5 to 10 things that he should get done. And then he'll start reacting. But he is very, very proactive, and he produces more than anyone that I know. inside our portfolio companies, of my colleagues and friends outside of our firm, he is very, very productive, and I'm in awe of what he gets done because he drives his schedule. I have a dear colleague that runs the largest publicly traded company in our state here. He doesn't have, we talked about the buttons and the iPhone versus sort of the old school. He has a flip phone. Still, the old Motorola flip phone, open it up and talks. As a CEO of a company of that size, that is the way that I would argue that he manages his day. He is not reacting. He knows who he has to call and reach out to. They can't reach him by text. They can get through via email, and he's got a great assistant and others, and then I'll get, when I'm reaching out to him that way. But if you want to get him, you're picking up the phone and you're talking to him. And he can judge how long that goes, how much time is spent, and he can rank in order of importance. And he's very, very good at that. But that's the way he's been doing that. It's his second publicly traded company, both well over $1 billion of enterprise value that he's built. He's someone who I interviewed for my dissertation when I was over at Oxford. Very, very good operator of the highest order, I would argue. So those are the guys that take control. So it's hard for me to go through and say, these are the 5 or 6 things. But if I really were to distill it down to its bare essence of where I look at great operators and what they do, they focus. You've probably heard the story of, when Bill Gates and Warren Buffett were first getting together, and this was facilitated through Bill Gates' father, and he said, you two, independently, I want you to write down one word that is the single most important word to you in your business and what you do. Hands a paper to Warren, hands a paper to Bill, they write it, they both read it at the same time. What's the word? Focus. Focus is what I estimate that this operator that I work with does very, very well. I would argue that this operator of this very large publicly traded business here in our region, what he does well, but they both have a different way of doing it. So I think it's incumbent upon us as operators to find a focus that works for us, whether that's sort of looking at the 5 most important things, the 5 or 10 most important things, and then sort of ranking those. That's the old Franklin Covey way of doing that. And they do it so well, but just if you've got a scrap of paper, if you're using paper still, if you want to put it on your smartphone, however you do that, it allows you to focus, whether it's, if yours is just by exception, managing by exception with a flip phone, okay, that probably wouldn't work for me. I wouldn't be so excited about that. And I've tried to talk him out of that many, many times. I think we've gifted him several smartphones over the years. Doesn't work. And I can't argue with the results, but these are operators that I would put as my all-stars that I've watched in action. You may not know, and some of the viewers here may not know, but they would certainly know a Warren Buffett and a Bill Gates, and that focus, I think, is key. So I probably don't have secrets of 5 or 6 of those, but focus. Awesome. So I'm going to do what I'm talking about. I'm going to focus and just say this one thing. Focus is what really makes a big difference in prioritization. That focus.
That's excellent. Intentionality. We for like one of the courses that we have, our line is literally what you focus on grows. Because that's what grows. Nothing else. Nothing else grows.
That's right.
So to take a little shift here, there's some buzz around these companies like Wayfair. Are you familiar?
Sure. They have a huge facility just south of us here. I think it's 500,000 square feet.
Very few profitable quarters, etc. Yet they have all of this enterprise value that we're talking about, and this goes along the line with, when a tech company that is pre-revenue gets like $1 billion valuation. So help us understand that dynamic.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I can, because candidly, I don't know if I understand it perfectly myself. And I don't know if there is anybody that does perfectly, other than guys who are writing very large checks, and they want those very large checks to become even larger checks at the end of the day. And so there's a bit of what I would argue today of the emperor's clothes going on. So not in a pejorative or a disparaging way to any of these companies, because we wish every company to do well in the space. But I would argue that there is so much capital out there on the books that needs to be deployed. And there's so many firms that are competing for each one of these deals, the meaningful deals, right? That it just drives valuation up. And so listen, again, these are not dumb investors. So let's look at this holistically for a moment. If those firms don't ultimately either get out with an IPO or become an acquisition target or see some liquidity at a certain point, the guy who probably thinks he has 50 or 60% stake, these founders, are not going to have a stake like that, which means their enterprise value in aggregate is going to be much, much lower than sort of this proclaimed enterprise value of $1 billion or greater. So I look at things a little bit differently, and I only say that in a worst case scenario environment. Just again, these investors are competing with one another, but they're generally enough, sort of preferred returns or prefs right on the cap table that if the valuation were to go to here, or they don't hit certain metrics here, or a time frame changes, it's going to sort of synthetically change that valuation from what really sounds sexy as $1 billion plus to something substantially lower. The investors are always going to make their money, or almost always, right? It's, as I've heard it described, it's buyers, keepers, founders, weepers. These buyers, these investors are going to look at this and, they'll get their money back or a good return on their money. It's the founders that will pay. We invested in a company that from day one had a thesis to profitability. They have always either been sort of cash flow neutral or cash flow positive, but never taken huge losses, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of losses to get back to a company that today is worth just under $600 million. So that's how we look at the world. And pet health, pet medicines, and even pet treats, that's not the sexiest business. And so these tech investors aren't going to look at that and say, multi-billion-dollar business. But this is a company, and this is all public information, that today is doing well over $200 million of sales, that's 6+ years old. Where I look at some of these companies that have a multi-billion-dollar valuation, and they are doing a fraction of that in revenue, let alone looking at probably their losses from a P&L of being 50, 100. In our space, in that space, Chewy was a good example.
Yeah, Chewy, exactly.
Yeah, so if you look at those guys, it was a multi-billion-dollar exit for them. They never made a dime.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's a strategy, but it's not a strategy that works in every business climate. Today, sure, and that's where we say there's really good fortune there, and we are building built-to-last businesses. We are building businesses that we believe can be profitable in an up market, can be profitable in a down market, are fairly disruptive driven. So listen, we care less about markets in today's valuation than we do about just building a business that's going to be very, very valuable 5, 10, 20 years from now. And I think that's the path that we take with everything that we do. And so, to your question of, how we see the world relative to these not so profitable businesses or these unicorns, and people love to talk about unicorns because it's terribly sexy. We're the far less appealing side of that today, but we're building to last. And if it takes us, an extra 5 or 10 years to get there, we'll do it. I like doing it fast, but we like doing it profitably because those are the fundamentals that make a business that's not dependent upon how much we raise or what valuation we raise. So that's what we've tried to do. But for that reason, out of the probably 10 deals that we've done over the last 6 years, and we've done several follow-ons on each of those deals, 2 of those have been tech-focused deals. So it's harder as so much money is chasing those tech deals. So I'm not saying, listen, you sometimes don't have to take a loss in early days. Most businesses do. But unlike our pet business, most businesses don't do $40 million their first year in sales. And that was a real rocket ship. So I like those kinds of revenue rocket ships rather than I do, hey, everybody thinks you're the next X or Y or Z. But I've lived long enough and been through enough of these cycles that I remember in 2001 when these companies were just going by the wayside. Pets.com, speaking of this same space, went out of business after raising hundreds of millions of dollars and having a multi-billion-dollar valuation. They're out of business. They're no longer. Because I don't think that was based on a solid foundation. And so we want to make sure foundationally our businesses are solid. And then we can worry about valuation. We're not in the IPO business. We're in a business building business.
That's good. That's good. Where does the opportunity sit right now for disruption in e-commerce? Social, where does that sit, right?
Yeah.
How you see it?
I'd turn the question back to you because nobody knows better than you, Trevor. That's a tough one, right? Because I don't know what I don't know. I think it'll be really easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and look back, oh, that was a great opportunity that we may have missed. I can only say that, you know, where everybody is chasing a certain, you know, something that looks very shiny, let's say this shiny object, and where, you know, a lot of our peers are going after something's very shiny. The best investors that I know, the best operators that I know are looking for other opportunities. And we as opportunists in our business have built, you know, both my career operating tech businesses as well as, you know, sort of what we do as investors of looking at things a little differently. Now, it's like looking at a pet health business, looking at a consumer electronics camera company. So, you know, one example is we invested in 2011 in a company called Contour Camera that probably nobody's ever heard of. And if you have, thanks a lot, you're the one, right? But it was very interesting for us to look at that space. We were looking at Contour, this sleek, sexy, rounded camera, instant on, 3 times the battery life of our competitor, waterproof without a case, all these really amazing technology feats that they had accomplished against this boxy little sort of 1950s looking camera called GoPro. Well, listen, GoPro goes, you know, the next year, so that's 2011, they're about the same size. The next year, GoPro goes to sort of $250 million of sales. Doubles again to $500 million the following year. Goes public at just under $1 billion of sales in sort of 2014, if my math is right and my dates are right. They skyrocket to $12 billion. We're, sort of just swimming to keep afloat. The business, we were the largest stakeholder. We indirectly invested in that one. Goes out of business while I'm at my, managing director and business partner's wedding in South Florida. Get a call. You just put in a 7-figure amount. They're going out of business. Well, we could have said, yeah, we're done, but we put together a group, bought it back out of receivership. Focusing on, of course, building great cameras, but we put together this thesis around intellectual property. And turns out, this has been held up in court, that we actually did invent all these wonderful patents around wireless connectivity. And we're really pleased with the outcome, and that's where the enterprise value comes in that business. It's not about, hey, us being a better widget that films, because, I mean, if you've been to a ski resort lately, there are a lot of these brackets for GoPros and other cameras, but not a lot of cameras sitting in those brackets today. Their market cap has now gone from $12 billion to about $1.5 billion or better. So the jury's still out on a GoPro as a company. That was the action cam category that they helped to create. It's now the GoPro category. But do people believe in it? And they've since gone into drones. But the good news for us is that we decided to focus and pivot on something that was slightly different, which was intellectual property, this wireless connectivity group of patents that have been held up in court. So that's really good news for us and those that have believed in us. That was opportunistic. That wasn't us looking and saying, okay, we're going to stick with consumer electronics in one way or another, and we want to go sell a whole bunch of cameras. Yeah, we'll sell cameras, but let's focus on where the real value can be created, and that's what we've done internally as a firm. We're just a very small firm, but a quarter, I was going to say a third, but a quarter of our group here is focused on our legal and how we add value to our portfolio companies through intellectual property, through preparing a business for success transactionally, for also preparing for a defensive posture so that, we don't get sued, but if we were to get sued, how do we prepare ourselves? And we've done that very, very well in a number of cases against deca-billion-dollar companies. And so the story is not completely finished with that one, but it's a business that we've now built into something that has real enterprise value. And not often does technology run towards you. You've developed a grouping of patents, dozens in this business, and then technology starts moving away from that. Oh, that's the old thing. Well, that's not the case here. That was designed for wireless connectivity between an action camera of sorts and being able to manipulate it. Well, now you've got drones, you've got self-driving cars, AR, VR, and they're all moving towards this technology that we've been able to build. So again, I would just say be opportunistic. Back to the viewers and those that we're talking to, be opportunistic. Try to look at things from sort of this asymmetrical view. And I've said that word a lot and just want to make sure that I'm clear in describing that. This is the differentiated view. You're looking at it from a whole different set of eyes. Everybody's looking and seeing how sexy social is this way. Well, maybe there's an opportunity over here in the not so sexy or appealing part of a business. So look for those opportunities because they're out there. And I would, rather than fight it out with these much, much larger companies, because they're all out there. And they could probably all wipe us off, as smaller companies, wipe us off the face of the planet, right? But you go where they're not, and that's a real opportunity to sort of build a business there.
A blue ocean.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So kind of concluding everything.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I've been so long-winded in my description.
No,
I want more questions from you.
Not whatsoever, man. Not whatsoever. I wish it could go on. I feel
sorry.
Mark over here kind of being like,
yeah.
No, okay. All right, I thought that maybe there was something that okay, cool. Maybe not in conclusion.
Okay.
But this is for all those who are in e-commerce right now or online marketing.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of the opportunity sits as a marketer because, and I just did a Facebook Live about this, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. There's a lot of code that sits out there that's just derelict, that perhaps was going to change the world. But it didn't get to the point where users started using it, or products, or whatever, because of a lack of marketing that resonated with people to adopt whatever the code was, the product was, etc. And so without being a marketer, it's really hard to get your product or your service or your great idea into the hands of people. So with that as the foundation, for everyone listening, if their goal was to eventually come to you and say, this is what I've built, now how can we join forces and create enterprise value or sell out completely? What would that conversation with you would look like regarding what they need to focus on now? How does that, and that's obviously a long conversation, but
well, let me answer you this way, Trevor, because I think it's important to note, anytime we write a check, we're voting with dollars, right? And we are betting on horses and not the race. We are betting on the individual that sits with us. And that's why it's easy to have a conversation with you, because you're the kind of person that does exactly what they say they will do. And that's what we're really trying to find anytime we sit across the table from somebody. Are you the person that is going to, you've just handed me the set of projections. Are you the person that's going to hit these or not? And fortunate for us in our investing, we've done well. We by most sort of individuals' views, we've done okay, right?
You're not the 85% fail.
We're doing okay, and we don't intend to ever fail, right? I don't think anybody does. I think that's the business model and venture. But that's why we're taking proven businesses that, like I say, have at least $1 million of EBITDA. Now we've gone outside of that thesis a little bit, but we've done really, really well, and we've only gone outside of that thesis when it's been a great operator like yourself that comes to us and says, I'm going to do this. And then, by the way, in a business like PetIQ today, this is them coming to us and say, we're going to do X. And not only do they do X, they do X times 3 or 4. And it's so rare in our business to see people that will accomplish what they've set out as the goal and then do that much more. So if you're going to come in front of me or any investor or any potential partner and put some numbers in front of me, because they're all guesses. We know that. I've never seen a set of projections that aren't conservative. Everybody's projections are conservative, right? They all say, hey, these are our conservative projections. We can do $10 billion next year, but that's conservative because we're going to own the world. It's always conservative. Everybody says it, but very few actually hit that conservative number. So what's conservative? I don't know. It's when those guys do exactly what they say they'll do, these fine men and women that come through our doors and we write a check and they do that. That's when we're willing to do a follow-on. So in PetIQ's case, in January of 2011, we wrote a $2 million check. It's a meaningful check to them. They said they were going to do X. They came back to us and said, good news, bad news. Good news is we did what we said we would do. I said, yeah, that's great. Bad news is we need more money to be able to do more because we're doing way more than we thought. They had projected something like 16, 17 million. They ended up doing just under 40 that year. So we wrote another check for $4 million and another check by the end of the year for $6 million. We had $12 million into that deal by year end. roughly, within a year in that business because they did what they said they would do. And we are betting on that horse. So when people are talking about, I'm going to pitch somebody for investment, or I'm going to pitch somebody about being a new business partner, do what you say you will do and beyond. And that makes for a great partnership. Because listen, you got to understand, whether it's me or it's a guy on Wall Street or Silicon Slopes or Silicon Valley that's writing a check, all they want from you is to do what you say you will do. And in my experience, people don't get better at doing that after you've written the check. They are on their best behavior before the check, right? Before the investment, before the partnership. It's beyond that when people have to prove who they really are at their core, and you get to test their mettle. And do they have that gumption when things are hard? I didn't have a backup plan. I don't think people that are entrepreneurs, let me just parenthetically say this. You should always have some sort of backup plan in a worst case scenario, but if you're an entrepreneur and you think your backup plan is to go back to your cushy job that you had, you're in the wrong business, because it's hard. It is over, under, around, and through the obstacle. It is hard stuff. And so to know that, men and women like you or I that go through the hardest part of businesses are going over, under, around, and through, and they're just ditch diggers. Those are the kind of people that we look for, that can both hit and do what they say they will do and beyond. And those are the people that we like to partner with. And once we've done it once, we're going to probably do deals with so many of these partners again and again and again, because it's a rare breed, and it's rarefied air to be the kind of people that do exactly what you say you'll do and beyond. So that's what we look for the most as we're partnering with people. The deal size is the thesis. The businesses are the thesis. The geography of where they are is the thesis, sort of where it could go is part of our thesis, but where we've changed our thesis is betting on the special horse and not the race. And that's what I would say to anybody that's listening and watching, is that be sort of that specialty operator that walks in a guy like my office or yours or anybody's, and be the person that knows that they will hit the mark that they intend to hit.
And that's 100% in your hands. Like, we have
no
full
question
control over that.
No question.
Yeah, that's incredible. So how can people, and this is one of those questions where some people are like, why did you say that?
Yeah.
But how do people contact you if they're interested in somehow shooting a tweet or whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
Where are you found? What's your home phone number?
Maybe I'm hiding on social. I'm pretty available on social media there. So do you want me to give
No, just Facebook.
Yeah, so we're Clarke Capital. Clarke Capital Partners, Clarke with an E, cp.com is where sort of our portal that leads to all of our social. Tells a little bit about our portfolio companies, a little bit about our thesis, about our team. It's a really wonderful team that we have. And our hope is to get to know operators as they're building up their businesses. I mean, it's really easy for the whole world to start banging on someone's door once they hear, oh, this is a $1 billion business, or they are doing X or Y or Z in revenues. We want to get to know people up front. We probably won't invest with them until they're really close to our thesis or on their way to it. But we like to get to know people up front. So I'd love to be in touch with those who are viewing today and understand their businesses and how we can help. I'm not a great coach or mentor that way, because we're coaching and mentoring our current portfolio, and that's more than a full-time job. However, if there are ways that we could collaborate or work together within the portfolios, it's very, very helpful for us. So that's sort of our flagship portal, and then the rest of our social runs through our direct site. So maybe that's a little old-fashioned, but we've got a myriad of social elements and places where you can reach us beyond that. So you find that all on our site. So We're grateful to be with you.
James, thank you so much.
Thanks,
we are honored. So thank you for the time and for all the valuable information to everyone watching and everything else.
Thanks a million. Good to be with you.
Thanks.
Thanks.